Are you recording
Welcome.
it?
I'm recording now. Yeah. Welcome to Loretta Holmberg. Loretta is a professor in at Loyola, and she works primarily right now with graduate students. She's also been a reading specialist and a first grade teacher. What other grade have you taught, Loretta?
I've actually taught in the classroom first grade and fourth grade, and then I was a developmental reading teacher in rural Pennsylvania for 2.5 years. So I taught anywhere from kindergarten all the way to fifth grade because I used to do pull out for guided reading sessions and also reading specialist work.
Okay, so Loretta's going to try to answer some of the questions that I've heard from people about guided reading. So one of the questions that people have asked me is if the students are there with you in the guided reading session, and if they have questions or they get stuck on words, specifically, how do you help those individuals while you're working with a small group?
So you mean the students that are in the group with you, or
Yeah,
the students that are okay, the
the
ones that
ones
are
that are
with
right
you?
there in the
Yeah.
group.
So
So
the
like,
ones, right, the ones that are sitting in front of me during the guided reading
right.
session, if they're stuck with something, I usually will. Well, they'll probably raise your hands, or ask Miss Holmberg, and we will. I will ask them what it is that they're having issues with, right? And if there is a poster where it's like trying to decode a word and we've gone through that already, I will point them to the poster
o-
and then have them try it on their own first. And if they're still struggling, then I will provide some guidance there and just scaffold their decoding skills to make sure that they're using it correctly. Some students need more than just one session to figure out how to decode something, especially if it's something new, and also especially if they're in my lower guided reading groups, they may need more help with that and may need to refer more to the poster, and then after that applying it on their own. I've also had times where I will have another student in the group explain what needs to be done for them, so they get to see another student show them this is how you decode this word, or this is how you try to understand this particular set of sentences on this page, for example.
Okay, great. So kind of going along with that question, another question that someone asked was, how do you know, what's the best way to know what comes next when a student or a group of students has mastered a specific skill?
Right. So they are put in their guided reading groups based on what they're able to do and what they're not able to do, right? Their needs as well. And so there's going to be a set of needs that we gotta try to make sure that they master. So I will usually, when I'm giving the running record as well as other assessments, I don't just rely on the running record for my guided reading groups. I also look holistically at other forms of assessment to form my guided reading groups. So I'm using my words their way spelling to form my groups as well. I'm using other forms of data that I'm giving the students, that might be district based or the unit based data, to form my guided reading groups. And so using those, I will know, okay, these students need to meet these skills. And these skills are then correlated to the Common Core state standards. And so, and so I have like a check off box. They met that skill, that's good. Okay, then the next skill, we got to make sure that they meet the other skill. So going in, I know already what my students need to meet, and we may meet, 2 or 3 different standards or skills that we're working on for that particular, couple of weeks, and then we move on to the next. For some students it takes a lot faster than others. Some groups we may have 3 students who meet a skill and then the other 2 have not. But I also will do progress monitoring and do running records frequently, so that students are not stagnant in one group. It is flexible, and they do get to move up. They don't always stick with one group. So I may have, let's say, level C and D students together, but my level D students may move up quicker. Or I may have a level C student who suddenly, just like get it really quickly, and they may move up to level E. And so then they're with my EF group or EFG group.
Okay, thanks. And I think that's one thing that comes as you are more familiar with a grade level. So if you're teaching second grade, then you gradually understand, okay, these are the skills. But
Right.
having something like Words Their Way, where the skills are kind of sequential, that should also be helpful.
Absolutely, the words their way is very helpful, and I use that a lot when we would do daily guided reading sessions because we would start off with word work. We would have that not only during the guided reading session, but I know I'm branching off here, but I would also have them do word work for the from words their way when they are working on their group activities when they are in their separate groups, not with me, but like with their own little groups.
Okay, so that brings up probably one of the most common questions that people ask is when there's a lot going on. So you've got a group of
Right.
kids right here in front of you, and then you've got maybe three or four other groups that are working independently. Um, what do you do to help those groups be able to work independently and so that you can actually give your attention to the group right in front of you?
Right. So this is one thing that I know a lot of teachers sometimes struggle with, and so then they would be very hesitant about doing guided reading because like, what are the masses going to do while I am teaching this guided reading group, right? While I'm guiding this group. So number one thing you need to remember is that you're not going to do guided reading immediately once school is in session, right? You're going to be testing and whatnot. But during that time, you're going to take at least, and I'm saying at least 21 days to build this habit of independent working independent activity with your students. So you need to depending on what kind of centers you're going to provide, you're going to have to teach your students explicitly what do you do when you're at the center, and then provide that guided help and also watching them while they're doing it until they get to the point where they get to be independent. So it usually takes me about 21 days, about 4 weeks, 4 weeks at the very beginning of the school year or so. But usually by the time we get all the data and whatnot, it takes about a whole month before we get them into guided reading groups. So I would have had time to work with them on, okay, read to self. I used to use the daily 5 activities when I was in the classroom. So read to self, this is what it looks like. And remember, they're only in the different activities for 20 minutes because I work with my guided reading groups for 20 minutes. We used to have a 40-minute block for guided reading. I wish it was longer than that, but Baltimore City didn't have that. So we were kind of restricted. So 40 minutes. So I would meet with 2 groups. While I'm meeting with 2 groups, right? 20-minute they will work on maybe read to self, and then another 20-minute they might work on writing, and we usually have something that's going on with writing. And I'm not talking handwriting, I'm talking about stuff that we will be doing on writing workshop that they're working on. So they may be revising, they may be working on constructing the beginning sentence or ending sentence, or another activity might be read to someone where they have a partner read. And partner reading is always good because it helps with fluency. There's repeated reading and there's somebody there to help you as well. So there's read to someone, listening to reading. So back in the day when we didn't have very many computers, I was like Stone Age, and we had a listening center with cassette tapes and also the disc, right? But nowadays, listen to reading, I've heard from my colleagues, they're using it on the computer, and so that's awesome, right? So if you have computers or if you have personal like iPads in the classroom, you could have
Mhm.
listen to reading. And so usually with the listen to reading, they're listening to books that they will also have access to, and they can listen and follow along. And then there's word work, and word work, we do it every single day, and that's based on their spelling level for their words their way. I love words their way. I think it's really, really beneficial, not only with the lower graders, lower grades, like, I taught a lot of first graders, right, for many years, 6, 7 years. But it was also great for my fourth graders because not everybody was spelling at where they should be. And so the lower ones were working on phonics, and then the higher ones were working on syllables and affixes and root words and bases and all that. So I think word work is awesome. So those were the 5, the daily 5. And like I mentioned before, take 21 days to establish a routine. Now, what happens if they have questions and I'm in a group? I tell them they cannot bother me when I am in that 20-minute group because I have to give my attention to the students that are in front of me. So I do teach them 3 before me. they need to think for themselves first. We need to inculcate in your students, that they can think, they have to figure out, like, what can I do? What should I do if I'm, so problem solving, right? Yes, I worked with first graders. They were 6, 7 years old, but they could problem solve and try to figure out. And if they cannot, then they have to ask one person that's right next to them. And if that person right next to them cannot help them, then they find another friend in the classroom. I've taught them, or I did teach them, like they cannot just shout from one end of the room to another end of the room. They can move around in my classroom. So it was always a busy classroom, but it wasn't loud while I was having guided reading. Like you could hear a little bit of chatter here and there, but it wasn't loud. It was productive. It was productive noise.
Okay.
But three before me is very important.
Okay, that's a good strategy to
Yes.
use. So the final question that I have is the work that they're supposed to do. And
Right.
really, I think the question is trying to get at accountability.
Right.
So if the student doesn't do the work or doesn't complete the work that you've assigned, what kind of accountability systems did you use with your students?
Right. So the work that we're referring to are the work where the in the guided reading session, or the
Um,
work that is outside
Yeah,
in
the
the,
work
which one?
outside. So let's say you had talked about writing
Right. Right.
and they're supposed to be revising something, but
Right.
you get to the end of the day or the week and they don't
Right.
have anything.
Right. So the work on writing, because writing is in, we use it as well during our writing workshop. It is an ongoing thing. There are let's just checklists on what they need to do. Right. So every Friday, usually Thursday evening when kids are gone, like I would take a look to see what they have done. Like they all have their own individual folders. I would take a look to see what they have done, and if they, I mean, if they've done sufficient but not completed, I would just make a note that to keep working on whatever they did. But there are some students who just don't get to it because they do not like writing, for example. And that's when I usually just flag those students. And on Friday morning, I have like a little pep talk and like, hey, we need to work on this today. And so you can't pick read to self or read to someone today. You need to work on writing, for example, because that's the Friday, that's our last day before the weekend, right? For those students that just don't finish, like maybe you see, read to self, there is usually something that they've got to write. So they're reading, and then they're responding to something on a bookmark, or doing like a little journal after they read, or writing a reason as to why they're recommending this particular book to somebody. The same thing for listen to reading as well. They have something that they have to work on. Now, granted that not all students will finish the writing portion every single day, because we all know that writing is just very tough for a majority of our students.
Mhm.
Reading is definitely, I think, a lot easier for them to just engage in. But writing usually takes a longer time to even start, and to expect something out of them in 20 minutes is kind of hard. So I leave that work that they need to do. They have like the whole week to complete, obviously. So if they started it on Monday and Tuesday and they read a book and they're rereading that book again on Tuesday, they can work on that same writing that they started off on Monday. By the end of the week, I need to see at least one completed thing for like the read to self or listen to reading, that work that's related to that. The word work, I can always see what they have done, because they're doing sorting, they're doing cut and paste, they're writing in their word journal, so I can always see really quickly whether they've done it or not. And if they've not done it, then obviously there's a little flag there, like, okay, you need to complete this today, before we go into the weekend. Do I send them? Do I send the work home with them? I don't, because I want them to read at home, but I don't want to give them the work to take home to read. So if they really don't finish anything by Friday, on Monday we will make sure that, or I will make sure that, I say we because I had a volunteer in my classroom as well, an
Right.
experienced core volunteer that helped me figure out, like, these students need to. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't want to interrupt you,
No.
but the timing is almost up for this
Okay.
recording, but I wanted
Okay.
to thank you for
Oh,
that.
you're welcome.
And I really appreciate the tips and the ideas that I will share these with my students.
Awesome. Great. Great.